Thank you.
High Streets, Designation, Review and Improvement Plan Bill, second reading.
So we now come to the second bill of the morning. Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, they say first impressions count, and often for our towns, the first impression that visitors will consciously draw is from the High Street. Certainly, it is the High Street that most often leaves the lasting impression of what a town is all about, the High Street being key to the town's character. Indeed, a striking 72% of British adults surveyed by Nationwide Building Society went so far as to say they judged the vitality of an area as a whole based on the High Street alone. Some high streets are beautiful and thriving places, and there will be lessons to learn from them. But even some of those will be struggling against retail trends, not least retail banking trends, which is the point of Nationwide's survey, of course, because it makes much of its commitment to maintaining a local branch network. And their marketing strategy is an informed one. 71% of people told Nationwide that they still feel their own local high street is an important part of the community. However, 67% said that their own high street had declined, with 62% saying that theirs had been neglected. 54% said that their own high street has insufficient variety, with only 38% saying their local high street adequately fulfills their shopping requirements. More than a fifth, 21%, would go as far as to describe their local high street as generally an unpleasant place in which to shop. This is deeply disappointing, not least because these findings are all from a survey in January 2020, almost immediately predating COVID lockdowns, and all the further challenges which have come since, with the post-pandemic inflation and Putin's illegal war against Ukraine. But of course, however disappointing these findings will not come as any great surprise to members across this House. The state of our high streets is an issue that exercises us all and is regularly raised by our constituents, following the incessant move online and out of town. It remains nonetheless something that will depress us all, that the single most common word chosen to describe local high streets, and the only word picked to be more than a fifth of respondents in that survey, was sad. This was followed by second place by bleak. The best that can be said from the survey of words, and I should say this is not presenting as a word cloud, but it's easily imaginable as one, is that the third best word chosen by respondents in describing their local high street is indifferent. That is clearly not where we want to be when the unique and localised character of our high street plays such a key role in defining the vitality of those wider communities that surround them. Nor does it give confidence to those wanting to visit or thinking of investing on our high street. Fortunately, the survey wasn't just a list of gripes. It went on to ask what people thought could be done constructively to improve things for the high street. And the 5 key improvements people want to see are fewer empty shops, more big name shops, more greenery, less litter, and better decorated shop fronts and signs. Absolutely.
Thank the honourable member for that, and I certainly recognise the picture he's painted. In Bristol we have 47 high streets and local centres. Some are thriving, but some it's been very, very difficult to revitalise them. And a few of the things he mentioned, and Bristol City Council has been very active, some of the things he mentioned are within the council's control, but others are very much down to the market. So will he be coming on to things like the empty shops and that to talk about what tools councils could use that wouldn't cost them huge amounts of money to actually ensure that high streets can thrive in the way he would like to see?
I thank the Honourable Lady for that point, and absolutely I would entirely agree that this is not just about local authorities. Local authorities play an integral and important role in this, but there are multiple stakeholders and partners, communities, businesses, property owners who all play an important role. And I think what the importance of this bill is about providing that vision and that focus, and local authorities bringing people together from all different parts and stakeholders within our high streets to come up with that plan and that vision and that key action plan to deal with some of these issues. And now, of course, there is always a need to pause and wonder if a list of apparently quick and easy wins is indeed quick, easy and affordable to deliver. Easier said than done is often the narrative, but I fear this has become an excuse for those who are avoiding difficult decisions and the action that is needed. On our high street, particularly Market Street in Longton, the once bustling high street, with many heritage buildings of iconic character, are now in a very sorry state. In many cases, owners are absent and show little or no responsibility for their properties, and in some cases deliberately allow it to get into a derelict state. I recently uncovered that Stoke-on-Trent City Council had shockingly not issued a single Section 215 enforcement notice against property owners who failed to maintain their properties in the last 12 months. It is quite clear that action is needed to address this.
Will my old friend give way?
Absolutely.
My old friend is making an excellent point, but can I just ask him in terms of his bill? It says it requires local authorities to designate at least 1 and up to 3 high streets. Now, when he defines high street, is he talking about the wider town centre area, or is this bill specifically about streets and identifying streets within a town centre?
I thank my honourable friend for making that point, and I will come on to explain some of this shortly, but this is actually about focusing on the core high street, which may be one or more streets. It may be a collection of streets, but it is focusing on that core retail centre that makes up many of our town centres. But as I say, I will come on to explain a little bit more in a moment. And the purpose of this bill is to place a duty on local government to take that pause and properly consider what can be done, developing an action plan on what can be delivered and what can be worked towards getting our high streets back on track. Retail and those big name shops will only come where there is demand and things are got right. That is to say, generating footfall and de-risking physical retail that is neither online nor out of town. People still value high streets as a place for retail, but that alone cannot, of course, be the only solution. They want the right mix of shops and leisure in the right public realm with other attractions to encourage footfall and dwell times like temporary events. The mix needs to be got right by and for each high street. The biggest risk that big name stores will face then, of course, will be that they are accused of by some of gentrifying the high street, quite possibly the same people who accuse them of betraying any high street they leave. Such is life, but we mustn't be daunted. As we will all have seen in the news just this week, the prize of getting it right could include the welcome return of Woolworths to the high street in its new iteration. I honestly don't think there is anyone who could misconstrue the return of Woolies to the high street as gentrification. Not without considerable bad faith, anyway. But there are certainly plenty of us who could champion its heartening reversal of decline. Sadly, the former Woolworths store in Longton, in my own constituency, is in a very sorry state. The problem is not even that it is not being reoccupied. It has been, but the occupiers subsequent to Woolworths have only further neglected and detracted from the high street, and now it's empty again. Most people are clear that they do not want high streets left in a spiral of decline, however gritty that makes them as urban spaces. Rather, they want the preservation of the historic fabric and character the high street brings, alongside enhancements that make it relevant to the future and attracting new, interesting uses. The reality of the decline of the former Woolworths in Longton is that the building has been raided more than once as a cannabis factory, and those raids were within 2 years of each other. At the time of the second closure in early summer of 2021, 1,500 cannabis plants were found and removed. Of course, COVID restrictions had played a part in helping to conceal what was going on at the time and had made our high streets places that people were wary of being. But even without COVID, the building has been a cannabis factory just 22 months before that, and more recently, a boarded up and abandoned takeaway on the other side of the road had been raided for a cannabis grow within the last 8 weeks. That former takeaway has rather pointedly been reported in the press coverage as being within sight of Longton Police Station. And it would certainly be my assertion that the police and crime prevention are also key to preserving and enhancing the character of our high streets. Working alongside our excellent Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for Staffordshire, Ben Adams, I've been delighted to recently secure Safer Streets funding, which will play a significant role in upgrading CCTV coverage in Longton, as well as a number of other crime prevention measures such as gating off of alleyways. Our high streets need more footfall, not less, and more dwell time, not less, so people feeling safe to visit is of vital importance. They need to be places that people take pride in and find pleasant to be in. This bill is about bringing focus to our high streets, ensuring local authorities are thinking about the challenges faced and working with those who have an interest in our high streets to look at how we can start to reverse the decline. But you will have noted, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I said Market Street, not High Street. At the risk of stating the obvious, my bill is not intended merely to work from a list of those streets in England that are literally called High Street. Instead, the bill seeks to require local authorities to designate a street as a high street for the purpose of the improvement plan. It is at least one designation and up to 3. Designations may be varied or withdrawn over time. It is not my intention that local authorities will be forced to designate the entirety of a high street either. If one end of it is clearly different in nature, such as residential, compared to the end of the street which is more traditionally for high street use. I also want to be clear that the intention is part of adjoining streets can also be included in the designated high street or continuous streets of different names that form what is thought locally as high street. Would my honourable friend like to... I think it was over there. Okay. Yes.
Thank him for his... thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank him for his work on this. And in fact, I was very interested in the point he made about the broader town centre area. Certainly my own experience is that many adjoining streets can actually benefit from this sort of measure, and indeed neighbouring shopping centres. So I would just urge him to look at that point and to be as flexible as possible, because there is a risk of displacement of activity and just concentrating in a very small area, and I do hope he's thought about that.
I thank the honourable gentleman for making that very important point, and I would entirely agree with him that those side streets that make up the high street as well actually are just as important, and we do not want to see displacement. We actually want to see the whole of that area lifted and improved and attracting in those new uses to fill those empty spaces. So I would entirely agree with him about that. And it will be important that local government makes that designation according to those local circumstances. So as long as an area is important to the local economy because of a concentration of high street uses, it is further specified that it should not include streets where the importance is considered to be derived principally from goods or services purchased in the course of business. I do think it's important to recognise that high street consumer retail, including hospitality, is part of what makes up our streets of totemic importance, even if defining high streets to the letter is impossible. But we must also recognise the evolving nature of our high streets and the need to also attract in many alternative, what may not be primarily retail uses. Indeed, the bill is not overly prescriptive by design. For example, it would have been an option to legislate for the definition of high streets from that used by the Office for National Statistics in its pioneering and inspiring experimental work with the Ordnance Survey to map the location and characteristics of high streets in Great Britain. According to their working definition, a high street is defined by 15 or more retail addresses within 150 metres in a dataset that aims to bound retail clusters using street naming, while also aiming deliberately to exclude other retail functions like retail parks, industrial estates and isolated shopping centres. By that definition, there are 6,969 high streets in Great Britain, of which 6,136 are in England. In London alone, ONS Ordnance Survey map says that there are 1,204 high streets. Most importantly, of course, in the West Midlands, there are 604, including the sweep of Market Street, Times Square and the Strand and the pedestrianised Exchange shopping centre in Longton, in my own constituency, which actually also includes my constituency office on the Strand. Interestingly, it also manages to capture that part of City Road in Fenton, also in my constituency, that is primarily retail in character, while excluding the part that is not. I'm drawing attention to this ONS data work and the demo map on the Ordnance Survey website because I think it may prove to be a very useful starting point for local authorities to explore it. It also, of course, helps me to make the point that local authorities do not have to work from scratch on this. There is no intention to place an onerous burden on local authorities. Rather, the intent is to get local authorities to become familiar with the data and more proactive about the best practice out there for the improvement of local high streets, in collaboration with all those who make our high streets the best places to be and take that interest. I rejected specifying the ONS and Ordnance Survey definition for the bill, partly because it encompasses so many streets within its definition that to designate and draw up improvement plans for them all would indeed be onerous. Although, of course, that could be managed with the specification that only up to 3 per authority can be chosen. Having said that, I would note that there are now nearly 10,000 conservation areas designated by local authorities across England. So in future, there may be room for a greater possibility in the terms of designations. But more fundamentally, the ONS and OS definition doesn't quite encompass what I would think of as the high street in parts of the country and indeed in my home city. But I do stress that it is a great starting point for designating purposes and for the consultees on designations and improvement plans. As the ONS puts it in the release of the 6th of June 2019, High Streets in Great Britain, the closure of branches of retailers across many high streets has led to worries about the decline of retail on the high street and in turn anxiety about how high streets will develop in the future. In this context, it is important that good data on high streets are available to monitor the changes and inform policy responses. It goes on to say it should be noted that this high streets project is very much work in progress. This is reiterated in the update of the 10th of August 2020, which says, "We continue to develop our work, which means that data and results in this article are experimental statistics." So this experimental stage, it does seem the right time to start a wider conversation with local government and local communities on which streets should be designated formally as high streets for the purpose of closer study, review and improvement plans. The requirement that at least one street be identified by each local authority ensures that every local authority will engage in this process, while the stipulation that only up to 3 can be designated at one time is designed to ensure this is not too onerous and that it is done in a meaningful way.
Would my old friend give way?
Absolutely.
Could I... My honourable friend's making an excellent speech, but can I impress him on this point? Is the point of this bill to support retail on the high street? If it's the point of it is to support retail, I just wonder what he feels in terms of the challenges that the internet and the change of the market is doing. And does he believe that in terms of part of the regeneration of the high street is bringing housing and people close to the high street and developing in many towns above the actual retail shops on the floor, there will be reams and reams of space in offices and spaces above there. Yeah. We need to bring people close to the high street to make it thrive.
I thank my honourable friend for that excellent point, and he's absolutely right. Whilst retail is an important aspect of this, and we hope that this bill will improve the retail environment on our high streets, this cannot be just about retail. The world has moved on, and with online, with out of town, of course with the pandemic as well, which means that we must encourage alternative new uses, hospitality, leisure, as he says, residential uses above those shops. Many of those above those shops at the moment just lie empty, lie dormant. If we can encourage in residential and other business uses into those spaces, that will really add to the vibrancy and vitality of our high streets. Absolutely.
Does the honourable member, I agree that he's making a very thorough, excellent speech. Does he share my concern that the whole concept of 15-minute cities has now been caught up in these ridiculous conspiracy theories, where really what it is about is we want people to be able to shop locally, to go out and enjoy leisure facilities locally, and to not have to travel out of town or into the city centre all the time, that you've got thriving local communities, that everyone who lives there can get what they need in that local community.
I thank the Honourable Leigh for making that point. She makes an interesting point, but I would say that it varies from place to place, and across the country we have a whole different number of high streets, towns, small and large, and so I think it would vary depending on the nature of the area, the nature, whether it's urban, more rural. I think it would depend on that right across the country, but there will be, as I say, considerable pressures, I no doubt, to designate a large number of high streets from the very beginning of this bill becoming an act, but I fear that it would prove overwhelming should be safeguarded against this. And I say this with a certain trepidation because there are 6 historic market towns in the modern city of Stoke-on-Trent, so the idea of having more than 3 is tempting because each of which has a high street that could be designated, and indeed should be designated at some point in time in a rolling process of improvements across the city. I accept this may prove to be something to revisit at later stages and consideration of the bill. The eagle-eyed in this House will have noticed that the high street uses for the purpose of this bill mirror those already legislated for in Part 10 of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023. This encompasses a good range of what would ordinarily be seen as high street uses by the general public and does not specify an exact number of retail addresses within a certain distance, as attempted in the ONS experimental definition. Members will be interested to know that the ONS discovered what it calls one notable geographic feature in England from what otherwise was a distribution of retail addresses on high streets across the whole of Great Britain that showed no clear pattern across the country. And the English feature, this is being germane to an English bill, is that there are hub towns with a high proportion of retail addresses on their high streets. Hub towns are those that are identified in the official rural-urban classification for England as being important hubs in the rural area around them, in terms of providing services, employment and businesses. DEFRA includes towns like Stone and Cheadle in North Staffordshire in this category. There will be a need for improvement plans to be consulted on beyond the immediate town and rural areas that do depend on high streets' success in these hubs. There is a great deal of data, and it is time for local authorities to use this to best effect to focus attention on preserving, enhancing and reviving our high streets. They should do this in concert with the communities they serve, both businesses and residential. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I just wondered if he was considering the public transport implications of what he's saying, because he's making a very good point about hub towns in rural areas and their connectivity to bigger towns or cities. Certainly in my county, one of the very important benefits that we have is excellent bus services, where Reading buses connect up to neighbouring smaller towns. And I understand that may be an issue in Staffordshire with the different level of bus provision. I just wondered if you wanted to comment on the importance of public transport and its ability to help regenerate towns and cities.
I thank the Honourable Member for making that point, and I would entirely agree with him about public transport being vitally important to many of our high streets and those town centres, because connecting up communities, connecting up those communities around, whether urban or rural, is vitally important. And that's certainly something I've seen in my own area, that the actual decline that we've seen over a very long period of time, and particularly brought on by since the pandemic of bus services, has had an impact, and this is something that I've very much been working on in terms of getting more investment in to address these sort of issues, so particularly through things like the bus service improvement plan funding that has a vital impact on addressing that. We've managed to secure in Stoke-on-Trent, £31 million actually of bus service improvement plan funding, which is going to specifically to address things like this. And I think that is extremely important across the country, that we look very much at how transport, whether it's bus, rail or other means, how they connect into the centres of those towns and high streets, and the impact that that can have. In terms of the work that's been underway, we have seen examples of where such an approach has already taken place under the High Streets Task Force, and there will be lessons to draw from that, including the warning that high streets will need to remain agile, which suggests that improvement plans need to avoid being over-prescriptive as much as being non-existent. What the task force has found is that the most common recommendations it has needed to give for the development of a clear and compelling local vision is that the need for what it calls place activation. Alongside that very compelling local vision, there needs to be that place activation and the requirement for more effective place marketing and branding. In my own town of Longton, we are starting to see things turned around, thankfully, and particularly this is thanks to the proactive approach of Longton Exchange Shopping Centre in attracting in new uses, and also organisations like Urban Wilderness, who are helping develop a programme of creative activities and events. In addition, levelling up funding we have secured is addressing sites like the Crown Works, redeveloping this derelict pottery site into new residential uses. And I hope the Minister also keeps to his commitment to see Longton also benefit from the Levelling Up Partnerships funding. But it is also about more than just government funding. As suggested by the High Streets Task Force, it will not be enough to preserve high streets, and those of us with high streets that are in conservation areas already know that the requirement to preserve is insufficient to arrest and reverse deterioration. If I might return to Market Street in Longton, I was delighted that it was specifically included in the Cross-City Heritage Action Zone for the potteries, and that subsequently it has matured into a partnership scheme in a conservation area. While we have now started to see properties benefit from this grant scheme, it is frustrating that even with this dedicated national support from the government, it is, and its heritage agency, work on improving the street has nonetheless proved agonisingly slow. There was COVID, of course, to contend with, but even taking that into account, it is not enough to explain these delays. It has been a surprise not only how little the City Council knew about the owners of buildings that need repair and reoccupation, but also how blinkered they have proven to be over the severity of the danger that can sometimes be presented. One heritage building recently fell into the street. It is still causing chaos now because it is fenced off out the area of the street immediately before a major bus stop within the town centre. It is a wonder that no one was actually injured or killed. I had reported its increasingly precarious condition to the City Council and was not alone in doing so several months before it collapsed. And this is on a street with a scheme where the government will make funding available to landlords to preserve and enhance heritage buildings and bring them back into use. There is an urgent need to know much more about the physical state of our high streets and liaise with owners and users to take things forward. Guidance and regulation from the Secretary of State are also important. I would ask that the House to note the role in issuing guidance that Historic England, for example, undertakes when designations and reviews of conservation areas are made. I do hope that the Office for Place, now based in Stoke-on-Trent, will have some role in this process as well, for high streets included. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge and highlight the very great deal of work of the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Select Committee that can be usefully drawn on. In the Government's response of March 2022 to that committee's 6th report on supporting our high streets after COVID-19, it said, "We want to create more vibrant, mixed-use town centre areas which will attract people to shop, work and for leisure activities, ensure they will remain viable now and in the future. To do this, we need to modernise an agile planning system, one which embraces digital technology, benefits communities and creates places in which people can take real pride." And the results of that desire has, of course, been the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, now Act, to which I have already referred, and to which I believe this bill is a natural progression and complement. In its response, the government also draws attention to the various support schemes and initiatives it has provided that are intended to assist the vitality of our high streets. Indeed, there are initiatives from a number of departments. We've seen the Future High Streets Fund and also Heritage High Streets Funds and so on. But these funds require largely reactive plans to be brought forward rather than proactive improvement plans that we need to see from local government that recognises the importance of high streets as beacons for their whole area and the need to know more about them and have good working relationships with the owners of the buildings on them in order to preserve and enhance them. It is also incumbent on local authorities to get the basics right. Nearly all of what was in the nationwide survey of the top things people said that they wanted to see are arguably considerably in the remit and powers of local authorities to deliver. Taking action on the quality of the public realm with more greenery and less litter, and appropriate design codes and enforcement against unsightly shopfronts, signs and street clutter will help to fill empty shops. And if it doesn't, say where the landlord is particularly obstructive or uncooperative, there are now powers for rental auctions to be required. This bill is about getting local authorities to use the powers that we now have in place to get on top of the challenges that are faced. Taking such actions on the issues that are important on high street users will bring in new uses, whether big names alongside the quirky and family-owned independent local businesses people want to see, or totally different new uses like creative and digital startups. If it is got right, and if it is more than an exercise in dolling the place up with fresh paint that lasts about 12 months, which is how I have had one scheme, not in my constituency, described to me recently. In some instances, the local authority may in fact need to get itself out of the way, giving more flexibility by allowing more temporary event notices to be issued, for example. But without more detailed analysis than is currently usually in place, it will be hard to deliver the longer-term viability that we all want to see. A short-term sticking plaster approach frustrates us all, and it does not adequately achieve the government's own objectives. With this bill, we will see proactive reviews and improvement plans for high streets that get closer to the root causes of decline, that bring forward the physical improvements and event programmes that are likely needed to activate places where feet will fall. I particularly want to thank the Minister for all his support and the Department in bringing forward this bill. I also just wanted to stress to the Government the importance of this being implemented as soon as possible. This is a bill to reverse the decline of our high streets, and I commend it to the House.
Question is that the bill be now read a second time. Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure not only to follow the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South, but also to support him in his endeavours with his private member's bill, and appreciative of his eloquent and considered contribution this morning. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm learning very quickly that on private members' bills Fridays there's a collegiality in the House and a reciprocity in contributions, and so I'm very pleased, recognising that I'm speaking on a bill that extends to England only. And I fear to tread in making a point, and I didn't want to intervene to ruin his flow, but of course a wider point that extends beyond the scope of these days and beyond the constraints of money resolutions and so on, that for as long as online retailers are paying significantly less than our high street retailers in rates and tax and other burdens from government, we cannot allow our high streets to flourish. When M&S is paying in 1 year what Amazon are paying in 20 years, we can see just the challenges before some of those that do wish to take the best aims of the Honourable Member's bill and to revitalise our high streets. I think he was absolutely right to frame, as he has, the ability for local authorities to designate not just one but potentially up to 3 high street areas, or high streets that go beyond one street, let's put it that way, for this purpose. And I say that as somebody who represents the city of Belfast. When I think of our high street, I can think of Donegal Place, and I can think of Royal Avenue, and I can think of Ann Street, all of which are within our city centre, all constitute high street all have had challenges in the last decade or so. We had a historic Primark building, but it's an old bank building in Belfast, fire, which shut down effectively the entire centre and the connecting roads for around 3 years. And it was a heritage building that was being restored but had a fire, and it had a cataclysmic effect on the ability for economy and trade and people to meet and mingle within our city centre. So I recognise entirely the points he makes, but I say that in recognising what Belfast as a city has to offer in this high street arena, none of it's in my constituency. And so if I can take the opportunity in the second reading debate just to inject the need for recognition of the neighbourhoods within our cities, and I think this was reflected by the Honourable Member in that within Stoke-on-Trent he can see 6 potential areas that could constitute high street or neighbourhoods with which there should be attention. And I recognise in some of the briefings that have been made available in support of the Honourable Member's bill this morning, there has been a quote provided from the Institute of Place Management and their co-chair, Professor Cathy Parker, who recognised that in over 40% of the towns they have visited in pursuit of the High Streets Task Force, that there is no real partnerships in place or the governance to deliver the transformative change that their high streets need. And there is a lack of partnerships. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, in referencing my members' interests, declaration of members' interests, I am a board member of Eastside Partnership. So it's not touching on our town centre, but it's very much East Belfast. And as a partnership, it is solely focused on regeneration in all its forms. And as a constituency MP, I am very proud of the work that the partnership does and the small and singular contribution that I, but many, many others have made over the years. Of course I will.
He's making an excellent point. I'm just very interested in his view in this, on this point, in that whether it's my honourable friend's bill or regeneration in any form, it can only take place in a meaningful way if people have pride in the area that they either live in or are from. And that generally comes from a knowledge or at least an understanding of the history and heritage of the area and some of the things that come. I just wondered in terms of his experience in terms of being a board member and what he sees in Belfast, is that sense of history and heritage used to drive regeneration?
It is, Mr Deputy Speaker, and first of all you need the pride, you need the commitment and the passion, the knowledge of what went before and what it is you want to achieve in the future. And it is the beauty of the partnership that I want to share with you that brings all of those strands together. A partnership that was born out of the need to tackle social deprivation, which has become in totality regenerative, but not in the traditional sense of simple physical regeneration. So as a partnership we support business improvement districts, we support traders associations. I can think of around the corner from my constituency office the Belmont Road and the work that goes on there, Ballyhackamore and Newton Ards Road as arterial routes within my constituency, all of whom get support in their endeavours to make the best of their immediate location within the broader neighbourhoods. A recreational space that spans 16 kilometres throughout the constituency across 3 rivers, which ties people together in an environmentally sustainable way that brings people out to mix and mingle. The hub, an area that was full of dilapidation, an area that was the target of much difficulty during the Troubles and dereliction and social deprivation, now totally transformed as an amazing civic space that celebrates C.S. Lewis, a son of Belfast, who was brought up in my constituency but is world renowned for his ability to write theologically and speak into that theological space, but as a professor and an author as well. A beautiful space and something that's completely transformed beside what the Hollywood Arches that we are hoping to redo and to regenerate for business purposes. The bottom of the Newton Ards Road, a brand new shared space, doctor's surgery, that is attended across a peace divide, that brings communities together for health but physical regeneration through the capital build and the social investment fund for the doctor's surgery, that bridges doctor's surgery, and delivering in a neighbourhood basis exactly the aims of this bill, but through shared experience, through shared commitment and through partnership. At the other end of the constituency, in Ballybean, round the corner from where I live, the second largest social housing estate in all of Northern Ireland, one that was blighted by the Troubles, and Ballybean Square itself full of dereliction, until the predecessor for the Honourable Member of Strangford, Mrs Iris Robinson, in conjunction with the Eastside Partnership, totally regenerated that space, Mr Deputy Speaker. Did so in a way that was connected with the local community, provides a business hub, brings in council services, provides other community services, and has transformed that area. And so it is that passion, the pride that you have in your area, the ability to draw on your past and the history, recognise difficulties that have been there, but have the potential and the vision to deliver for your local people, that provide the elements for success. So I think the intervention is absolutely right, Mr Deputy Speaker, and the highlighted point that there are too few partnerships. 40% of these towns that need regenerated and high streets that need to be reinvigorated, too few. And you don't just need another committee. You don't set them up for setting them up's sake. You don't do it because a high street task force asks you to do it. You do it because you believe in your area and you want to see your area improved. So I share all of that, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I want to support the Honourable Member in his bill. I think his bill will help crystallise in a productive way the opportunity to reinvigorate high streets. Yes, of course.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and I was really interested to hear what he said about that importance of preserving the history and the legacy of the community as well. In one of the longest high streets in my constituency, Church Road, which goes into the neighbouring constituency, Bristol West as well, we have hidden behind Wetherspoons that is now just closed, an almost pristine Art Deco cinema, which actually it opened in 1912, where the first silent films were shown. And it's now become an asset of community value, where the community is trying to buy that and turn it into a community hub. There are other people that are interested in turning it into housing, but although we have a great need for housing, having something like that as a centrepiece where people would flock to come to Church Road just to see that historical asset and to see, as I said, a very pristine Art Deco cinema would really play an important role. So I just wanted to support what he was saying about it. Shops are important, housing's important, but those assets are really important too.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Honourable Lady for that contribution, because it allows me to move from C.S. Lewis Square up the Hollywood Road towards St Mark's Church in Dundela, Bunker Hill, that was C.S. Lewis's church, has his communion cups donated by the family, and smack right bang in the middle is the old Strand Cinema, which is now the Strand Arts Centre. And for 8 years, before I was a Member of Parliament, actually 10 years I suppose, I have been banging my head against a brick wall in support of the Strand Cinema, which is pre-war, Art Deco, beautiful. Used to be one screen, probably the size of this chamber, and is now divided into 4 screens, the old balcony, separate screen. And we just secured £12.7 million, I think, from Levelling Up for full restoration of that Strand Arts Centre. And if there is, genuinely, if there is a connection that we can make between the two, and share the plans and show exactly what they are doing and hoping to deliver in my constituency, if that's any benefit to her and hers, they'll be more than happy to share it. And all of this comes through partnership. And it was the partnership element that I really wanted to impress upon this debate. I chair a subsidiary of our partnership, which is Eastside Tourism. It's all about encouraging people to come and visit East Belfast. When I was the leader of our party group in the council, there was an opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker, to allocate £105 million for leisure transformation across the city. And through one political deal and another, I got £48 million of that for what is now my constituency. And as part of that, we were taking the heritage baths in East Belfast, the old public baths where people used to go and bathe after a hard day or week's work in the shipyard. And they've been totally restored and integrated into an all-singing, all-dancing, state-of-the-art leisure centre. and the old slipper baths where you can only have one tap. And Mr. Deputy, you might remember this, where you only get one tap, you get 6 inches of hot water and you can put as much cold in as you like. If you want a long bath, it's going to be freezing. But drawing that new regenerative leisure facility in with our old industrial heritage and past is something that through our tourism initiative, as part of our wider regenerative partnership within our neighbourhood, highlights exactly what can be achieved when you have the passion and the will and the determination, recognising where you've been and where as a community you want to go to. And I make those reflections, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because whilst this is very much focused on high streets, and rightly so, and framed entirely right, that within our wider cities and our spaces, we have neighbourhoods and communities where there's a real passion to make their places better than they are today. And that's really what should lie at the heart of the aspirations for our cities.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome and support my honourable friend's bill, my near neighbour's bill from Stoke-on-Trent, south, to help improve our high streets. As a Member of Parliament with 4 what you might call market towns in my constituency and 1 large village, we're very much aware that development plans, particularly when you have a big unitary authority, which we have, Cheshire East Council, development plans need to be in close partnership with local people and local businesses because they know their communities best. And councils like Cheshire East need to listen to local people and need to listen to them more. Whilst a campaign to stop car parking charges was successful in 2010 when this was proposed by Cheshire East Council under different leadership then. The leadership then recognised the detrimental effect this would have on towns like mine. Unfortunately, indeed, just yesterday, current leadership of Cheshire East Council has now implemented car parking charges. Controversial isn't really a word that describes what has happened. There was opposition from more than 8,000 residents in a consultation. Of 8,384 representations, 8,127 were objections, 127 were neutral, and just 130 supported these proposals. Now, could anyone say that Cheshire East Council is really listening to local people? That's why this bill matters and is important. I would describe Cheshire East Council in this respect as tin-eared. These plans are short-sighted and potentially detrimental to high streets across my constituency. Cheshire East Council may be under funding pressures, but this is not the way to resolve them. Councillor Mike Muldoon, hard-working and committed councillor from Sandbach, has contacted me again this week, and not for the first time, to say how such proposals would detrimentally impact potentially on small restaurants, publicans, welfare outlets such as chemists, opticians, hairdressers, shops and local businesses that enjoy the footfall of local people to pop in and out quickly from their towns. And indeed, Councillor Mundu spoke very powerfully on my behalf at a demonstration in Sandbach as to how wrong these car parking charges would be, because they would penalise local people, residents who come to shop and use facilities in their own town, harm small businesses, the lifeblood of our local economies, and stifle instead of strengthening community spirit as people stay away from local groups and events. And wrong too, because they will exacerbate parking on local side streets to the considerable inconvenience of householders living nearby. So my honourable friend's bill would help handle such issues in a considered and planned way, rather than what looks like a a knee-jerk reaction to raise funds off the back of local people, off the back of high street customers and businesses. Now, I fully support my honourable friend's proposals in this bill to ensure that towns have a really thought through plan to regenerate their towns based on the priorities of local people and put to the local people. And can I say, for consultations that are actually listened to and meaningful. There are too many consultations taking place simply to tick a box that a consultation has happened, and that has to stop. And I'm looking to this bill to ensure that that does not happen. There are other issues in my constituency that I'm very concerned about, and which I hope such a bill would actually ensure that the authorities listen to our local communities. One such is in Holmes Chapel, where the parish council has over many years produced thoughtful proposals as to how to deal with traffic pressures in the centre, pressures which are one of the biggest local concerns to residents. And over those many years, I've supported the parish council and residents, and I pay tribute to all of those involved in developing these very thoughtful plans. And it's really important that principal authorities listen to such proposals, and the whole ethos behind my honourable friend's bill would promote this, and I hope result in a change of approach towards the dialogue that needs to take place in such cases. Holmes Chapel Parish Council have proposals to introduce traffic calming measures such as roadway markings and gateway features and lower speed levels on London Road through the centre of the village to make this a better place for shoppers and pedestrians, many of whom are elderly in Holmes Chapel. And so I do hope that the council officers and others will listen and now actually implement the proposals that the parish council have proposed over very many years. And then too, we need to make sure our towns and high streets are accessible. Sandbach is a place which is actually a wonderful market town. My towns of Alsager, Congleton, Middlewich, Sandbach and the large village of Holmes Chapel are all thriving, have many independent local businesses. We want to ensure that we keep it that way, and access to our communities' centres is essential. And so in Sandbach, one request that has been made to ensure that there's better access is for a pedestrian crossing on the hill, a main thoroughfare into the town, a busy road that's a mixture of residential and some shopping. Now, one such crossing was thought to have been planned, but I understand from my constituents, and in particular pay tribute to Sarah Bradley campaigning for this, but I know she has huge support from constituents and residents in the area. I understand this is no longer the case and that Section 106 funds may be directed elsewhere, and I urge the Council to rethink on this. Can I also just make a comment about bank closures and say how much I support the campaign by our colleague, the Honourable Member for Derbyshire Dales, to save our banks. Our local communities are being debanked, and this is making it very hard for local people, for charities, for the elderly, the vulnerable, and for cash businesses to access banking facilities that they need. In my constituency, Alsager, for example, had 2 banks and 2 building societies and now has none. So let's ensure that we have a local voice supporting local banking. And then, can I also mention in Congleton, we need to ensure that our towns, like Congleton, remain vibrant. That's why my Honourable Member's Bill is so important, and that facilities that people want stay there. Facilities like our local Boots. It's very sorry. I'm sorry to hear that they're closing the Bridge Street shop in the centre of town, and they're focusing just on the branch at the retail park outside the centre of town, which has free parking. And I do wonder whether this plan to close has been in light of the proposed car parking charges, which are now being introduced. Mr Deputy Speaker, I will close there and leave it for other colleagues to continue to, I hope, support my Honourable Member's Bill, which I very much support myself.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I, if there is a thing that interests me, I shouldn't say more than anything else, it is this. It is how, and I'll put it this way, I am a firm believer that history, heritage and pride in an area is a central driver to regeneration. You can come up with all the policies you want in the world about anything, but if those fundamentals are not there, the emotional connection between the human being and where they live is central to our political life. When it doesn't exist, there is failure in my part, from my perspective. I am the very, very proud MP for Bury North. I was brought up in another area, and that town, which is in West Yorkshire, I won't name it, but that town is part of my soul, part of who I am. And people look at that and say, my God, how can that be? But I'm proud to say that. And one of the things that one of the reasons I'm going to give you a clue how it here, Mr Deputy Speaker, now. But one of the reasons why I have been a season ticket holder at Huddersfield Town Football Club for many, many years is because it is a representation of an association with the pride and the history and the heritage of an area that means something to me. The first team that won the First Division Championship 3 times in a row in the 1920s. And for the town that I was brought up in, going into that town as a young boy when I went out there and shopped, it was a place of wonderment. There were independent shops. It was thriving. It was full of, it was cinemas and all sorts of other things. My heart bleeds now when I go there. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm trying to make a political point. But the centre is dying, and it never used to be. And I wonder whether that care, somehow we've lost the care and the feeling for a place. In my own town of Bury, we secured a levelling up fund deal bid for the regeneration of the town centre. One of the things I've tried to persuade my local council that you can build a building in whatever shape, way off that you want, that might or might not be something, but unless people have an understanding of the history and how we've got here, I'm asking that my local authority to create signs, to create something which tells the story of Bury. Because a lot of people in Bury don't know their own story. And if you don't know your own story, where are you going to go? And so I think this is a really interesting debate. I think it is some really interesting points are being put forward. My heart sang when, sadly, the Honourable Member for Bristol, I think it's East, South, when she made the point about this Art Deco cinema. That Art Deco cinema is as important to regeneration as Marks and Spencer's and Tesco's. It is that thing that sparks people into life, that gives that joint, collective, communal experience where you want to go out, you want to spend your money, you want to invest in things. Footfall is not done by my honourable friend who's just spoken, makes a very valid point about car parking charges. I think we could all discuss car parking charges as a separate issue for the rest of this debate. But it is something else that is the important thing. And I agree with every word that my honourable friend has said. And my only, I would not disappoint. My only thought on this is that for the high street to be successful, the things around it have to be successful as well. So one of the things that I'm proud as a member of Parliament to have achieved was securing £1 million for Gig Lane in my constituency from my honourable friend's department to be bought. Now, in the sense of that, When I first came up and this issue was raised about getting £1 million of taxpayers' money to buy a football club, there was a little bit of outrage. Why taxpayers' money shouldn't be going into that. Taxpayers' money shouldn't be doing this. This, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a football ground that is the 12th oldest in the world, that is less than a mile from the high street at the centre of Bury. But what does it do? It's the only place in Bury where 3,000 to 4,000 people every single fortnight and on some occasions come together. That's the ultimate football provider. And that football provider, that £1 million, the cost and the benefit, not only in terms of how it makes people feel, and Bury Football Club are back, Mr Deputy Speaker, which I'm sure you know, charging up through the leagues, but it brings, the preservation of a heritage asset brings people into the town centre. It brings people to share experiences, to be interested in their town. And I think that is an example of what we should do. I was silently, when my honourable friend from Bristol was talking, I was shouting, and I know my honourable friend, the Minister, will say, Community Ownership Fund, because that is the exact means. And I can give an example. My honourable friend from Belfast East made a point about Levelling Up Fund, but the Community Ownership Fund, which is where Gig Lane was preserved, has also been used in the latest round of funding to save the Co-op Theatre. The Co-op Theatre on the main street in Ramsbottom, which is a town in my constituency, is a theatre, Mr Deputy Speaker. It is unique. It's one of only 3 in the country. It's an original 1870s co-op theatre where people were going in there not just to listen to concerts, where you were having, anatomy class or whatever you wanted to do, you could go in there and do it. And this theatre has been laying untouched for 60 years on the top floor of a building in Ramsbottom. Nobody knew about it. Now, if you want a reason to go to a place, all the wonderful, I cannot recommend, Mr Deputy Speaker, highly enough, the coffee shops and the bars and the independent retails in Ramsbottom. But my God, actually a reason to go to see an intact 1870s co-op theatre as part of the history and heritage of the industrialisation of the town. That's what regeneration is about. And we need to link these things into what my honourable friend has been talking about. I made an intervention on my own. So I have a big town, Bury, and a small town, Ramsbottom, within my constituency. We have to face up to the reality as well in terms of our high streets and our towns, in that unless something dramatic happens in terms of fiscal policy, the challenges that businesses face when online businesses compared to retail in terms of energy costs, in terms of rental costs, in terms of all of those things, these are challenges that are going to prove too much for many businesses. And we have to think very strongly as to what our high streets are going to look like. And again, it's the same point that I made to my friend, that I would urge as part of this, we have to find ways to make use of empty buildings in town centres. In 2021, I think we introduced some legislation regarding making it easy. I think it's Class E regulations, which make it easier for shops and such like to be turned into residential property. But we must do that. We must look at that. We can't just simply look at these empty shops and empty spaces with one, an unrealistic eye. But secondly, it gives the housing and the opportunity and the regeneration and brings life back into places. So I think in closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, the last thing that I would say is this: that if we're a free market economy, thank goodness, socialism hasn't got us yet, Mr Deputy Speaker, and long may that be the case. So the question is, can the state regenerate anything in one sense? What can the state do in terms of if it is our job to release the potential of individuals and towns and places, what do we do? As a Conservative, I believe in releasing burdens, whether it be taxation or regulation or all of those other things. That's what we do to make people make their own decisions, to be able to invest their own money, to be able to regenerate high streets by their own endeavour and their passion for the area in which either they live or which they come. But I think as part of this debate, and a hugely important part of this debate, is this idea of heritage, culture, tapping into something, thinking honestly about what state can invest in that is going to actually get people off their settees off their couches, away from watching Coronation Street, away from doing all the other stuff that's going on now, and actually going to motivate people to come and do something. We forget too often when we pontificate in this place that people, when they vote, whatever they act on, people act upon emotion. People aren't going to say regeneration has happened. I've got a levelling up fund bid, Mr Deputy Speaker in Bury, for a flexi hall, and it's great. It's going to be great. But a flexi hall is a flexi hall. It's a building which hopefully we're going to do something in with it, and hopefully that inspires. But what really inspires is what my honourable friend was talking about in terms of the partnerships that he was talking about in Belfast. What really inspires is going and looking at and the theatre that my honourable friend was talking about. My honourable friend from Crewe is about to speak. I'm sure he can make an example of that. My honourable friend, the Minister, can. That's what matters, and that's how the government can intervene. And so it's terribly unfashionable, but as the chair of the APPG for Northern Culture, let's invest in those things that inspire people, that give them belief in their town, that give them belief in their area, that give them shared collective experiences. If we as the government, if we as working cross-party can do that, these town centres will be regenerated.
Mullan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and a pleasure to follow my friend, and I agree with so much of what he said and what other members have said. And I really want to congratulate my friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, for bringing this bill to the House. His speech really laid out in detail the issues and challenges that we face, and he's proven to be a vociferous champion for his high streets. You know, British high streets should be the vibrant hubs of commerce and community life, yet many are now facing unprecedented challenges in the wake of evolving consumer habits and economic shifts, particularly after the pandemic. Too many retail units lie boarded up, and this bill recognises this reality and takes a proactive approach to try and breathe new life into some of these critical spaces alongside other government action. This legislation is not merely about preserving bricks and mortar structures, it's about preserving the beating heart of our communities, and too many businesses have closed their doors, and as a result, jobs have gone too, affecting families and individuals. I want to say a few words about both Crewe and Nantwich town centres and high streets, and I'll begin with Nantwich. Nantwich in my constituency would commonly be regarded as the more secure of the two, and that is probably true, but even in Nantwich we've seen more vacant units than we would like, and we can't take the success of any of our high streets for granted. As the member for Congleton mentioned, recent changes confirmed yesterday are going to see parking charges increased in Nantwich and in Crewe, and that's going in the wrong direction. The council will probably lose more money if our high streets aren't successful. What we need to do is encourage their greater use, not make it even harder or more expensive for people to make use of them. So as I said, even in Nantwich we've got challenges, but there is no doubt my constituents are particularly concerned about our town centre and the high streets in Crewe. I'm afraid the history is a long and sometimes tortuous story. Firstly, there was a decision to construct a retail park within walking distance, and this has seen businesses move and customers making use of the free parking and big chain stores that we find there. And secondly, there was an ambition to build a new leisure and retail unit in the heart of the town.
And again, I apologise if this is a slightly controversial view, but do you think that out-of-town retail parks are an absolute disaster? Because I do, in terms of town centre regeneration. They serve no purpose at all, apart from, the same product can be delivered in a much more harmonious and better way, I believe, in towns where they've traditionally been in those shops.
I think we have to recognise the jobs and the investment that sometimes retail parks create, but there's no doubt that they certainly lack on the added value that you get when you place those retail units within more diverse communities. And certainly, as I've seen in this case, if you're placing an out-of-town retail park, there might be one argument to be made, but to place a retail park immediately next to a high street and a town centre is created enormous challenges for that town centre, which we've seen over the years. And in part, to try and rebalance that, the plan was to build a new retail leisure centre in the heart of the town, right on our high street, though as others have mentioned, this definition of high streets, there's multiple streets that make up the high street, and a few further out near the train station that we would see as a local high street too. But unfortunately, that plan led to a long period of the town centre with a big boarded up space and then a demolished space, and that really dragged the whole purpose and vibe of the town down, and that's not surprising really. And unfortunately, market changes as that delay has dragged on have led to the decision ultimately not in the short term to proceed with that, and perhaps potentially not ever proceed with that. And that's at the same time allowed us to build a new car park and a bus station, which we've been able to do, which will open this year, which I think will help and benefit the whole of the town centre. But it really leaves us with a pressing priority to make use of that now vacant space and that derelict space, otherwise it's going to carry on dragging down the rest of the town centre. And I hope that we see rapid progress from the Labour-led council this year to get that space back into use. And I'm sure the Minister will understand that when it comes to talking about challenges facing Crewe, when it comes to its retail sector, its town centre, it would be amiss of me not to mention the challenges, in addition, we now face with the decision taken on the HS2, which has always had divided opinions on the House for its overall merits, but I think everyone would recognise that Crewe in particular was going to benefit from that investment and that regeneration. It's got short-term challenges when it comes to some of the accounting changes that it needs to make, and I've spoken repeatedly to government about that, and I'm optimistic that we can get a solution. But then past that, we actually also need to see additional investment coming to Crewe to make up for that loss that we would have expected to see on the back of HS2. But what I don't want to do is be overly negative, because there absolutely are positives for our high streets in Crewe. We have our £22.9 million town deal, and we have £14.1 million coming from the Future High Streets Fund. Some of the things we'll be doing with that money include a programme to get vacant units back into use in Crewe, exactly the kind of challenges we've been talking about today. It includes landscaping work that we'll be doing to make the journey in and around and to the town centre and its high streets easier. It's bringing back into use buildings that are not smack on the high street, maybe slightly further out, like Flag Lane Bass Community Centre that will be coming on board, a new boxing club, and the site of Miriam Street. All these things encourage people into town, onto high streets. It creates that football, and as the member for Bury South mentioned, his football club does the same thing. We have a football club in Crewe that also, as you said, brings in a lot of people into the town. We have a history centre that we've started to construct, and that's going to have additional improved public space. All these things are positives, but of course we must do more. And I think this bill does seek to do something different to tackle this crisis. I've worked very closely as part of the town board with Cheshire East local authority, and I've seen the benefits of having an engaged local authority, but of course you don't see that everywhere. And even if I don't agree with everything they've done and think they're perfect, I've seen the effort and the willingness to engage, and actually I think every local authority should be engaged in that process. And the designation aspect of this bill acknowledges the unique character of each town and each high street, and emphasises that one size fits all approach is not the way forward. But by conducting comprehensive and periodic reviews, we can ensure those distinctive needs and opportunities for each community are met. In terms of the specifics of the bills and the things that I think we need to be careful about, as we've heard, it says that we need to designate between 1 and 3 high streets. Well, we've heard, even as I've said, there are a number in my constituency. The member for Congleton, who shares the same local authority, has several in hers. Across all of Cheshire East, there are probably dozens of potential high streets. I think it's right to not say we've got to get going on every single one of them. What I wouldn't want to see is local authorities choosing maybe the 3 rosiest high streets with the best possible outcomes already on the table. I hope the guidance ensures that the selection of the high streets gives some thought to where they're most going to benefit in tackling these issues that we've mentioned. And I also want to talk briefly about vacancies in particular, and in particular absent landlords, and I welcome the work that the Minister, I know, is passionate about around the high street auctions, because it really shocks me when we try to engage with landlords to try and tackle some of the issues in Crewe, and we find they couldn't care less. Actually, we can't even get hold of them. The council can't get hold of them. They might respond to one letter, they won't respond to another letter. And of course, some free markets. People have bought a property. The state should be careful in designating exactly what it should do, but there must be limits when it comes to properties in locations that are of high community interest. And I think we need to tackle that. And I want to again touch on the remarks made by the member for Bury North in regards of not thinking that all this should be about is freezing our high streets in stone and pushing back the tide. I think we do have to accept in the long run that there is going to be a shrinking in the footprint, our retail footprint, because of the change in online shopping, and actually a smaller footprint I think is a more sustainable one in the long run, and replacing that with things like in-house living. So I think this legislation is an opportunity not only for inviting investment, but also a firm political commitment to strengthening the fabric of our communities. It fosters political accountability and signals a commitment to our long-term well-being of our towns and high streets. So I welcome it progress through the House, and I look forward to seeing it coming into law and the benefits that I think we'll see in multiple high streets across our country and our constituencies as a result.
I'm inspired just to say a few words during this debate because I want to talk about my own hometown of Gainsborough, which is directly affected by this sort of issue. Gainsborough is a traditional market town and industrial town, a small town in North Lincolnshire, and suffered from industrial decline in the 1970s. And we had a fantastic scheme in Marshall's Yard to redevelop the old factory right in the middle of the town, Marshall's, which had been decaying for years. And we made it a fantastic shopping centre. The whole thing is going really well. Then we've got Morrison's outside. We've got Tesco, which has been put up next to Marshall's Yard. That is all fantastic. But the trouble is it's sucking life away from the high street. That is the problem, and from the marketplace. And there's now a real issue in all our towns that as we develop decaying industrial areas in the town or have more out-of-centre shopping centres, the inside of the town is decaying. And this is a huge issue for all our towns. I've been very fortunate. I worked with the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Michael Gove, and we got £10 million of Levelling Up funds, which for the Gainsborough South West Ward, which is directly helping us. I think one of the keys to this in an old town like Gainsborough is to use heritage. We had many decaying shops, and we've put a fantastic amount of work in creating beautiful new shop fronts, which lifts the whole area up. Another point I want to make is that in the marketplace, again, which has slightly suffered from the fact that the trade is being sucked into Marshall's Yard, cars are not allowed to park. Now, if you go to France or Italy or Germany, they allow cars to park in the marketplace. It brings life. I know we're not supposed to have as many cars as we used to in the middle of towns, but Gainsborough is not London. It's a small town. Bringing in more life is quite important. So I think that to sum all this up, the government's got to work very carefully with the district councils, really at very local level. And West Lindsey District Council has had a good record in working with central government to try and ensuring that we get this development into the town. But as I look at the Minister, I wonder whether having a mayor for Lincolnshire is going to make a very great deal of difference. I'm quite, as the Minister well knows, I'm quite dubious about this idea because we're going to have a mayor of Lincolnshire, which is a large rural area. We're going to have a county council. We're going to have district councils, MPs, ministers, all competing for attention. And I'm also worried, and I said this to the Minister, about the consultation, which is all veered towards the fact that we have to have a mayor. So when the Minister replies to this debate, and that's one of the reasons why I'm speaking today, is I want him to convince me that when he imposes a mayor on Lincolnshire, which will need to have a salary based in Lincoln, that he's not going to suck power and resources from the really local authorities, the district councils, which are doing all the hard graft and the work to improve our high streets. Thank you, Sir Roger.
Liz Truss.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South in being successful in the members' ballot, and I'm pleased to be responding to this second reading today. And can I start by thanking all of the honourable members who have taken place, the members for Belfast East, Congleton, Bury North, Crewe and Nantwich, and Gainsborough, who have talked about their local area, and a couple of themes have come out. One of those is partnership, people working together, and the importance of heritage. Now, the purpose of this bill is to place new requirements on local authorities in relation to high streets, and as part of this, the legislation allows councils to designate streets in their areas, as we have heard. Now, this legislation before the House has similarities with Part 10 of the Levelling Up Act, which allows local authorities to designate high streets and town centres for other purposes. This bill, however, allows the designation for the purposes of establishing improvement plans. We can all agree that supporting the future of our high streets needs backing from all levels of government, and local authorities most certainly have an important part to play in that, especially given that it feels like over recent years people have been tolling the funeral bell for our high streets. In that time, we've had the government's plan for the high street, the Build Back Better High Street strategy, and now the long-term plan for towns. But you wouldn't know that walking through many of our town centres today. Unfortunately, it's all too common to see boarded up shop fronts and closed shutters as fashion retailers, bank branches and countless small businesses on our high streets have been forced to shut up shop for good. Now, of course, among these losses, there have been success stories of individual shops and thriving high streets, despite the odds. But it's hard not to look at the figures and think of decline. Research carried out by the British Retail Consortium in 2023 found that 6,000 shops had closed down for good in the previous 5 years. And the sad truth is that the pain of these losses isn't felt equally. The BRC's figures for April revealed that nearly a fifth of shops in the North East are standing empty compared to 1 in 10 in the South. And then there are the disparities between city centres and rural areas. Once again, the government's claim to levelling up rings hollow. With these closures comes workers losing their livelihoods and communities unable to access essentials. Bustling high streets are more than the sum of their parts. They are places in which communities come together. That's why we can't have any more business as usual. We need to be imaginative about how we make our high streets work for communities today. And this requires careful planning. And in Labour, we've been clear that we want to see local authorities in the driving seat, giving local leaders the powers and flexibility to turbocharge growth in their areas. And in difficult circumstances, the differences Labour councils have made in transforming local high streets is testament to this potential. Bradford's City Centre Growth Scheme has brought 70 vacant high street units back into commercial growth use. And in Wolverhampton, the council have plans to transform a derelict site into a food and entertainment venue in the heart of the city. But for local communities to succeed, they need the right tools. And it's no secret that 13 years of Tory economic mismanagement have left local authorities struggling. This government's efforts to support high streets have so far involved a begging bowl approach that's pitted communities against each other, with old pots of money discontinued, packaged up and resold as new. Labour would put a stop to this micromanagement and empower communities to grow their local economies as they know best. I will.
Whilst I recognise that there are challenges when there's a more public process to the allocation of funds, I hope the member would accept that if you were lucky enough to be in government, there will be a set pot of money. And even if behind the scenes you make some tough decisions about who does or doesn't get it, you won't be giving everybody every bit of money that they want, unless, of course, you've got further plans than the current 27 billion that you're going to spend to ensure every high street that wants some money gets some 28 billion gets the money that it wants.
The honourable member for that intervention. But actually, what we would say is that this is about planning and giving local authorities powers to decide what is best for their own area. So there is, of course, a challenge. We would scrap business rates and bring in a fairer system which would reduce the burden on high street premises. We'll tackle antisocial behaviour by introducing a new town centre police patrols and putting an end to the £200 rule that stops shoplifting from being investigated. Now, Mr Speaker, I am pleased that this bill recognises the importance of local authority plans, and we will not be opposing this bill today. But there remain a number of questions to be answered, and I hope that the Minister or the Honourable Member can answer them, please. For example, Clause 3 of the bill makes the improvement plan a material planning consideration, but it's not clear by what mechanism these improvement plans would have to be taken into account when producing the local plan that councils are required to do. Could the Minister or the Honourable Member also tell us how the provisions set out in this bill would align with neighbourhood plans? And we've already heard an intervention about that. I will.
I'm genuinely interested in this because The Honourable Lady has criticised, I think, the government in terms of... a number of members have pointed to examples where money, whether it's in Belfast or wherever, has been going specifically into projects which are linked to regeneration. Now, the Honourable Lady appears to be saying that we don't believe in any of that, and our policy is simply, let's just hope that the local authority will make the right decisions. I can tell you the Labour local authority in Huddersfield has been making the wrong decision for the last 30 years. That's the reason why the council and the town is in the state it's in.
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention, and I was interested, as I said to his intervention earlier, on neighbourhood plans. That is one of the key things. We recognise the need to invest to make our high streets viable and lively, as many people have said, and I've set out some of the steps already about how we would do that. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, if we're to create welcoming, inclusive town centres that function as vital community spaces, then those communities must have a say in their design. But to achieve this, we need the return of a collaborative approach which empowers local authorities to thrive and play an active part. I know that Labour has that vision, and I hope the government will be adopting it. Thank you.
Jacob Young, minute.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South on his success in the ballot and on his sponsorship of this very important and worthwhile private members' bill. It's his unwavering commitment and efforts to champion our high streets, including the high streets that he was able to mention in his remarks, that has led to this matter being raised in this House, and I'd like to thank other Honourable Members for backing the bill. I can confirm that the High Streets Designation Review and Implementation Plan Bill has the full support of the Government. Because there are arguably few more visible barometers of a healthy local economy, local pride and quality of life than our high streets. I know this all too well from my experience as a Member of Parliament in Redcar and Cleveland. Like my honourable friend, I am privileged and proud to represent the area where I grew up. But one of the reasons I came into politics was that my area, my community, my town, my high street felt like a place that had been forgotten and left behind by the incumbent political regime. I think it can be hard for people who move around a lot, or perhaps those who live in a busy city, to understand what that feels like, when a place you care about and where you have deep roots seems to have lost its way, as the Honourable Member for Bury said. I remember growing up walking into Borough Town Centre with my mum and dad and hearing about Uptons. It's probably how my niece and nephews feel now when I talk about remembering Woolworths, although, as the Honourable Member said, it looks like Woolies may be coming back. Our high streets are not just places where people shop and access goods and services, but they are the heart of our community life, places where people come together. Their success is therefore vital to realising our ambitions to level up economic growth and opportunity across the country, both economically and socially. That's why the challenges of our town centres, have been facing in recent years need to be taken seriously. Some have weathered dramatic shifts in consumer behaviour and the legacy of the pandemic, but many have struggled. We've seen the collapse of major high street retailers like Debenhams and high streets that were once at the soul of our communities are now blighted by low footfall, high vacancy rates and antisocial behaviour. We're committed to working with local communities to help turn this around, and this bill will play an important role in that mission, alongside other government interventions as part of a broader strategy to help high streets recalibrate themselves back towards their communities. This includes putting billions into high street regeneration and renewal, including a new High Street and Towns Task Force as part of our long-term plan for towns, measures to bring vacant properties back into use and make town centres safer via crackdown on antisocial behaviour, a new £2.5 million High Street Accelerator programme bringing together local residents, businesses and community organisations to develop a long-term vision for revitalising high streets, and significant planning flexibilities to ensure they continue to thrive as centres where commerce and community meet. We know that every high street is different and that local areas are best placed to understand their own problems and find the right solutions through strong local partnerships on the ground. These partnerships are often key to transforming the fortunes of our town centres. And we want to support councils as well as local businesses and local communities and make sure they have everything they need to succeed. so that wherever you are in the country, you have a high street that meets the needs of your community and one that you can be proud of. And in that vein, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I commend my honourable friend, the member for Bolsover, who has explained to me the need for investment in Bolsover Town Centre, and I'm delighted we were able to award Bolsover £15 million of levelling up funding in the autumn statement in November. It's my hope that Bolsover are able to use that funding and this bill to improve their high street. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the most important ways we can make this a reality for more communities is for councils to be using their powers to drive improvements. That's the aim of this bill. Powers such as Section 215 powers that my honourable friend mentioned, to require land to be cleaned up when this is detracting from the surroundings. We know that these are not always being deployed as well as they could be, something which will only become more significant when the new high street rental auction powers are introduced later this year. This will further bolster the regeneration tools available to local authority. Now, moving to the measures in this bill itself. The bill will require local authorities to designate at least 1 and up to 3 high streets in their area and create plans to improve them, which should be published every 5 years. In choosing these high streets, authorities will need to identify streets of specific economic, social and cultural importance in their area, assess their condition and come up with plans to preserve and enhance them. Local residents, businesses, community organisations and others rightly will have a real say on these action plans, and the local council will be accountable for delivering them.
Just picking up on the remarks made in my speech, what can we do to ensure that we're making sure that councils are designating and putting the effort and work into those high streets that need it, rather than just picking ones that perhaps are thankfully flourishing and perhaps less in need of attention, just so that they potentially don't seek to avoiding the hard work that we actually want to be put into these designations?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. We'll be working with local authorities and members of this House, no doubt, to establish the right guidance for local authorities in choosing those high streets. And as I say, they'll be subject to consultation as well. The consultation that I'm about to talk about. Accordingly, the bills will require councils to consult on which high streets are chosen, and we've already heard some early pitches today. It's exciting to imagine just the difference that this could make. Fewer empty shops, more people visiting these high streets and staying longer, a boost to local pride and people's quality of life. As I said earlier, different areas have different challenges, so the improvements we can expect to see will also vary. The focus in one area might be on tackling antisocial behaviour, where in another it could be creating more green spaces to rest and socialise. The bill will also create a duty on local authorities to take into account high street improvement plans when exercising its planning functions, directly to the question from the shadow front bench. Supporting already the strong protections for mixed-use high streets and complementing tools available to local authorities, such as the changes to use class orders in 2020 to create the new commercial business and service use class mentioned by my honourable friend. This brings together high street uses such as shops, restaurants and offices, and enables changes between these uses without planning applications. The high street improvement plans will also reinforce measures in the National Planning Policy Framework, which require local plans and decision-making to support town centres to adapt and grow over the long term. And in addition, support the use of Section 215 powers requiring unsightly land or property to be cleaned up. Madam Deputy Speaker, we recognise that local areas will know best what their high street improvement plans should cover. I'll give way.
I wonder whether my honourable friend could comment on what he defines as a high street, because if it is Bolton Street in my constituency, back onto there is the East Lancs Railway. And the East Lancs Railway are in the process of making an application for £3 million to the community, to the Community Ownership Fund. So it's not so simply the shop that's on the front of it. Heritage projects and others which are attached in the immediate vicinity can benefit from government money to drive that regeneration as well.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. We've already heard examples of how high streets could be defined by the honourable member from Stoke-on-Trent South, but I would say to him, I look forward to such an application to the Community Ownership Fund, and I very much thank him for his regular plugs of the fund. As I say, once the bill has received royal assent, we will be issuing guidance on developing these improvement plans, and we would of course welcome any input on what this guidance should contain from honourable members or other interested parties. We recognise it takes time to implement plans and see their impact. At the same time, it's important that the plans are meaningful and they're not neglected and left to gather dust. We believe that 5 years for reviewing and, if necessary, updating the improvement plans strike the right balance here, allowing enough time for these plans to take effect while ensuring they remain relevant and central to the renewal and reinvigoration of our high streets. This is very much about local residents, businesses and communities seeing visible, meaningful improvements, but we recognise that these must not come at the cost of overburdening councils that are already under pressure. We will therefore ensure that local authorities have the extra funding that they need to be able to deliver the measures in the bill effectively. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said earlier, this bill builds on the extensive range of support that we're already providing to truly level up our high streets with local people in the driving seat. Support that means more money. I give way.
With local people in the driving seat, before he sits down, will he assure me that any powers or resources given to the Mayor of Lincolnshire will not suck resources away from West Lindsey District Council, which is the primary promoter of improvement of our high street?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am grateful to my honourable friend. I was going to come on to him, but since he's brought it to my attention sooner, I would say that he's mentioned the landmark devolution deal for Greater Lincolnshire. He mentioned it comes with a mayor. But what he failed to mention is the £750 million it comes with as well. And I can assure him that we are giving more power, more funding to communities like his in Greater Lincolnshire. And I would urge him to support the introduction of a mayor, because I truly think it's going to be transformational for Greater Lincolnshire. As I say, support that means we are giving local authorities more support to truly level up their high street. Support that means more money, billions of pounds of investment in high streets that are sorely in need of a helping hand to get back on their feet. This includes our £1.1 billion long-term plan for towns, which I'm grateful for the shadow front bench for plugging in her remarks, launched in October, which will power ambitious regeneration projects across the UK over the next decade. Through this, each town will develop a long-term plan for regeneration based on the priorities of local people and receive a 10-year endowment-style fund worth £20 million to deliver transformational projects. From boosting the look and feel of town centres to protecting local heritage, like my honourable friend said, to cracking down on antisocial behaviour. The plan will also establish a new High Streets and Towns task force to provide bespoke, hands-on support and expert advice on placemaking, planning and design. And our new Towns unit, announced last week, headed by Adam Hawksby, the Prime Minister's Town Czar, will ensure that local leaders have the control that they need over decision-making. This funding comes on top of the £2.35 billion we are already investing through our town deals, £830 million in the future High Streets funding, and the £4.8 billion being invested into communities through the Levelling Up Fund, unlocking the economic potential of communities across the country. Communities like mine in Redcar, where £25 million of funding is being invested through the town deal in regenerating the High Street, demolishing the old Woolworths and M&S buildings, creating a new leisure facility on the High Street, as well as rejuvenating our much-loved seafront. Or down the road in Eston, where some of the £20 million of Levelling Up funding we received is being invested in regenerating Eston Square and the precinct buildings. Not long after I was first elected, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was given a book about the history of Eston by former councillor Anne Higgins. In the book, it had a picture of Mullan, one of my predecessors as the MP for Redcar, meeting residents and businesses at the old James Finnegan Hall to discuss the deterioration of Eston Town Centre. More than 2 decades later, and 4 members of Parliament later, we're finally delivering on this. This funding demonstrates to the people of these towns and others like them across the UK that we're keeping the faith with them and delivering on the things that matter most to them. And as I updated the House late last year, we have so far invested over £13 billion through all of our Levelling Up funding streams in regenerating communities nationwide, delivering real change in communities like buried. And I'm so pleased that my honourable friend plugged the Community Ownership Fund in the way that he did. His constituency has benefited with £1.5 million of investment directly into the communities there, on top of the levelling up funding of £20 million for Bury Market and Flexi Hall. Or in communities like Crewe and Nantwich, which is benefiting from £37 million through the Towns Fund and Future High Streets Fund. And I was surprised to hear from him and the honourable member from Congleton about Labour's new car parking charges. Sadly, they've just done the same in Redcar as well, and I urge them to keep up their campaign on behalf of their constituents and businesses in their communities. I was grateful to the member for Belfast East for referencing the investments in his constituency, including in his cinema, and talking about the value of partnership working. And my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, whose bill this is, mentioned the Levelling Up Partnership for Stoke, and on top of the other funding for that Stoke has already received, I can assure him that Longton remains part of our focus for the partnership. But funding alone is not enough, Madam Deputy Speaker. To deliver real change, we are giving local people the power that they need to make decisions on the ground about the future of their communities. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, for example, introduces high street rental auctions to drive forward regeneration through changes to compulsory purchase powers and providing more flexible pavement licences for business, empowering local people to tackle symptoms of decline by bringing vacant units back into use, increasing cooperation between landlords and local authorities on regeneration, and making town centre tenancies more accessible and affordable, helping attract new businesses to these areas, supporting the creation of new jobs and growth that sustains prosperity long term. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're also making a priority of getting the fundamentals right, ensuring that people feel safe. Tackling the causes and impacts of antisocial behaviour is key to this, which is why we're using our wider antisocial behaviour action plan, published in March 2023, to make the heart of our towns better places to be, tackling the visual markers of decline, reopening boarded up shops, improving the look and feel of public spaces, giving tired public buildings a lick of paint. This includes the High Street Accelerator programme that I have the pleasure of leading, which will bring together businesses, residents and community organisations to develop a long-term vision for revitalising their town centres. Each of the 10 pilot schemes we have launched in towns such as Oldham, Scunthorpe and in neighbouring Stoke will receive £237 of funding over 2 years to set up the partnership, develop their vision and begin delivering change. In addition, we've introduced significant planning flexibility so local decision makers can make better use of the buildings in their town centres and ensure our high streets remain places of commercial and social activity. Permitted development also provides freedom to change more premises from commercial to residential use so that much needed homes can be created in high streets and town centres. So, whether we're talking about a smarter use of planning levers, getting boarded up shops back up and running, making our streets safer, or investing billions in our town centres, we are breathing new life into our high streets. With local leaders, local people and businesses who know and love their communities best, driving the changes that they know are needed to make a difference. The bill put forward by my honourable friend builds on these significant efforts and we're very proud to support it. I appreciate, like him, just how much this matters to communities of the kind we represent. For them and for communities right across the country, this is about delivering on the commitments we've made to level up growth and opportunity and pride. And we're sticking to our plans and staying the course, commencing the measures in this bill at an appropriate time once the bill has become law and ensuring that local authorities have the right lead-in time and guidance to designate their high streets and create their improvement plans. I'm enormously grateful to my honourable friend for introducing this bill and to other honourable members for their support and contributions during this debate. We're back in the bill, back in our high streets, and Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend it to the House.
With the leave of the House, Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am incredibly grateful for the Minister's very kind words and for all his support in helping bring forward this bill. And I'm very grateful as well to all those members across this House who've shown their support today. We've had some incredibly impassioned speeches, and it just shows how much people care actually about their high streets and those towns and villages within their communities that they represent. The opposition front bench spokesperson particularly referenced around local plans and neighbourhood plans. I think it is right that they do fall into this, and that this bill is part of that. But this is about those plans giving due consideration to this bill. It isn't about stopping potential development that would sit outside of this bill and new exciting developments coming onto our high streets. It's just about giving that due consideration. So I don't think it will have any major impacts by having this bill and having the points that are particularly set out within the text of the bill. In terms of some of the points that honourable members across the House made, I particularly thank the member for Belfast East and also to the member for Bury North for raising particularly the importance of those heritage and cultural assets which are so important to our high streets and build the vibrancy and footfall and attract people in to our high streets. I was also particularly interested on the points made by the member for Belfast East about the fact that there are too few, I should say, partnerships. This is particularly what this bill is trying to address, the need to bring people together to actually have that governance and have those plans to help address some of the issues within our town centres. Also, my honourable friends over the border in Cheshire, particularly to the honourable members for Congleton and Crewe and Nantwich, it is absolutely shocking to hear of those plans coming forward to increase and create parking charges in some of those town centres. I know this will have a major impact. I've enjoyed on a number of occasions visiting some of the towns in the communities that they represent, and this will have a very damaging and detrimental impact. And a number of members particularly referenced the fact that we've got lots of out-of-town developments where we see free parking. This will particularly only further emphasise that move towards those out-of-town retail spaces and cause more damage to our high streets and town centres just at a time when we don't need it. So I do entirely agree with them, and I wish them well with their campaigns. I do want to, as I say, thank all members across this House, and also the Honourable Member for Gainsborough, who mentioned about out-of-towns shopping areas and the impact that that has. I do want to mention the fact that we have been working very hard to get this bill together. I hope that we can continue to work across this House to bring forward this bill and also to take it through the other place and deliver what will, I think, be a really important bill to get our high streets back on track, revive our high streets and bring people back into our towns and communities so that our high streets can thrive once again.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As members that opinion, say aye. Aye. If the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you. We